The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
This was described as a narrow ruling, but in fact, this was a landmark decision that has fixed the medical exemption in this state. We have been fighting for this decision for 6 years. And the courts have tied themselves into a box where there is no other option than what the court today ruled and the Western District ruled, which is that schools can no longer overrule a treating physician's determination. His co-counsel, he won the case in the Western District of New York. Thank you. Between these two cases, there is no longer room for courts to say that it is okay for schools to overrule treating physicians about whether a child needs a medical exemption in New York. Some of you probably came hoping that today we would decide about the religious exemption too. And the judge did not want to get into that. He didn't need to get into that because he was able to deal with this based on the disability claims and the medical claims. But that fight is not over. What New York courts have done is they have opened the door for a religious challenge too.
Hey, yeah!
Sure that Children's Health Defense and myself and Chad are all working up what we will hope to be the case that brings that religious exemption.
Give it up for Children's Health Defense!
Love Children's Health Defense. All across this state for the last 6 years and even before, New York school districts have been denying medical exemptions to children in desperate need of them. Children have been hurt. Children whose siblings have died from a proven vaccine injury have been forced to move out of state because districts won't accept their exemption forms. This has been rampant and absolutely cruel and inhuman.
Yes.
What has been going on?
Yes, inhuman and unconstitutional.
We have two districts, the Eastern and the Western, saying that is not legal and interpreting the Second Circuit's decision to say you cannot do that anymore. We can fight it and we will win.
Yes!
I think the most important thing, though, also important, is that Sarah Doe is going to be going to school.
Well, good morning, CHD. It's Wednesday, the 13th of August, 2025. What an amazing day that was yesterday. And any second now, Sujata Gibson is going to be coming on to talk to us about this. But just to let you know, the run-up of the show today. So following this segment, we are going to have Mercury and dental fillings must end. That's with Kim Rosenberg. And then you're not going to want to miss Dawn Richardson's segment today. If you want to avoid mRNA contaminated blood, you need to listen to this segment. And then we're going to go to our medical professional story of the day. But for now, let's bring on the most amazing Sujata Gibson. Good morning and congratulations, Sujata.
Good morning, Polly. It's so good to be here. Thank you.
What an amazing achievement. 6 years you've been fighting this. Tell everybody, remind everybody about it. I know we've had you on so many times and Sarah Doe, but just remind everybody what you've been doing for 6 years.
So, 6 years ago, the New York State Department of Health enacted regulations and started encouraging school districts to overrule treating physicians about whether a child needs a medical exemption from vaccines. Prior to that, the law was very clear, and it still is very clear. It says that if any physician certifies that a child may be at risk of harm, that child is exempt. But somehow the Department of Health decided to empower school principals to overrule treating physicians. So we have been litigating this in a series of chess moves for 6 years. We've gotten some terrible decisions, but finally, over time, we've sort of chipped away at all of the sort of rationales that the court tried to originally impose for allowing this to happen. And we are now seeing with Sarah Doe's case a pretty solid victory that I think leaves no more room for doubt. School districts cannot overrule treating physicians.
You know, Sujata, this morning before you came on, I went to the mainstream news thinking they must be covering this. It's so, such a huge achievement. I can't find it anywhere.
Well, there was some coverage. News 12 was there. But yeah, these cases, we've come a long way in this fight, but I think mainstream media, is still funded by big pharma and not necessarily eager to publicize our victories.
No, exactly. But Sujata, it's such an important case, and it's right on mission for Children's Health Defence. I mean, this poor girl should have been in school ages ago, but she can go back to school now because of this. I want to talk about the power of fighting and working through. For 6 years, many people would have just given up and said, I can't actually handle this anymore. But look at where we are now. You won.
Well, I mean, we were able to keep fighting because of Children's Health Defense and because people keep showing up, and people didn't just give up and say, okay, well, it didn't work out the first try, so we're just going to move on with our lives and let these medically fragile kids get tyrannized and have to move out of the state. People kept showing up. Yesterday at this court hearing, we had over 200 people there. I mean, it was packed. There was an overflow room. They had used the biggest room in the courtroom. And I think that makes a difference. We're showing the courts and the world that this issue isn't just going to go away, that schools and the government can't treat children like Sarah Doe in the way that they've been treating them. Sarah, for example, has a really egregious case. Over 6 doctors, New York licensed doctors, have certified that she is ineligible for this vaccine. She could get seriously hurt or die. She's only missing 1 vaccine. She was very badly injured when she had to take 18 vaccines when the religious exemption was repealed in 2019. And since then, she's in such a fragile state of health that she even tried to go to a walk-in clinic, and they said, no, we are not going to vaccinate you. And yet this school district still refused. So, I went a little off topic from what you were asking. Does it matter if people show up? Yes, absolutely. Does it matter that we don't stop fighting? Yes.
And also, when you say, thanks to Children's Health Defence, I want to also say to the people, Children's Health Defence would not exist if it wasn't for them. So this is your win, you the people that donate and pray for Children's Health Defence, that makes it okay for us to be able to help out and fund these things. So everybody should be celebrating, because it's because of you this win has happened. And I think that's important to say. What about religious exemption? That's got to be next.
Well, that's next. So this case, it's a little bit complicated in New York, but part of the reason I think we won this case is because New York has kind of backed itself into a corner with religious exemptions. There is this doctrine that says you don't really have a constitutional right to a religious exemption, or even to review whether you should have one, unless you can show that the law is not generally applicable. And one way that the courts define that is, if there's a medical exemption but not a religious exemption, then you do get real court scrutiny over whether that's fair to not have also a religious exemption. But New York courts have tried to get around that law by saying that only applies where there's no room for discretion on the medical exemption. So part of the way we got here, where, this court is issuing a ruling saying there is no longer any discretion over the medical exemption. If a doctor writes it, you have to take it, is because of this greater effort of the courts to sort of get out of having to scrutinize the religious exemption. But hopefully, that's clear. But I think we have very good facts to show that yes, school districts can't second guess doctors, but they have been exercising discretion nonetheless. And so we do automatically get strict scrutiny over the religious claims as well. And we're bringing a backup lawsuit that that we believe has a real chance of reinstating the religious exemption in New York.
So the fight continues. Sujata Gibson, you are one amazing human being. We're so grateful for you for just fighting on and all the care and love that you give to these people. So thank you for everything that you do. We're just in awe of you.
Thank you. It's very much a team effort. Mary Holland and at the time, now Secretary Kennedy, we all began this fight with litigation 6 years ago. We keep getting up and living to fight another day. And this kind of strategy, it does take time, and it takes a lot of people to think through chess moves. I will remind people that, Brown v. Board of Education didn't happen in a vacuum. It took 20 years of litigation strategy to get to that case. So that is what we're doing here with our legal battles in New York and elsewhere through Children's Health Defense. Is we are employing that kind of strategy with a long-term goal of protecting all children and people from these mandates and allowing people to really have a choice about what happens to their bodies and what kind of pharmaceutical products they do or don't take.
Sujata Gibson, amazing. Thank you for coming on so early. So you must be exhausted after yesterday. So we so appreciate you being here. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Congratulations. Well deserved for all around. All right, everyone. We're going to hand over to Kim Mack-Rosenberg and learn about mercury in fillings. So we're going to pass on to that, and I'll see you tomorrow on Financial Rebellion.
CHD. I'm Kim Mack-Rosenberg, Children's Health Defense General Counsel. I'm very excited to have with me this morning Anita Tibau, who has expertise and vast knowledge about the use of mercury in dentistry. We talk a lot about mercury in vaccines, thimerosal, and we had exciting news from HHS about the removal of thimerosal from flu vaccines very recently. Anita, can you talk to us about your background, how you came to be involved? You've been an advocate for mercury-free dentistry for over 2 decades, and how you got into that. You mentioned to me, as we were talking earlier, about standing on the shoulders of giants, who some of those giants are, and how even the announcements from Secretary Kennedy recently, how that has sort of fueled further interest in mercury-free dentistry and getting the word out to people about mercury in amalgam fillings.
Oh, well, thank you, first of all, Kim, for inviting me. This is a really important issue, and it's the last use of mercury in the human body. So the first question, how did I get involved? Like most people that have become very active in an issue, it's personal experience or someone close to you that you love, and you find out, oh my God, we've been told a bunch of lies. I mean, I can't sugarcoat the use of mercury in dentistry, because since the very beginning of its use, they have known, because the dental surgeons in the 1850s were also MDs, and there were the dental craftsmen who were barbers who shoed horses and were perhaps carpenters. When the American dental surgeons found out that it was mercury, they made their members sign an oath of ethics not to use it. But the dental craftsmen said, wait a minute, it's cheap and easy to use, and all we need is a chair. We can make money. And it became a propaganda tool, and they actually were forming the American Dental Association on the use of mercury in dentistry. So the American Dental Association, most people think is a medical arm of the United States government. It's not true. They're a nonprofit, just like many of us out here. And they're more like the Teamsters. They have a huge lobbying arm, and they basically dictate the health and of dentistry in the profession. So how I got involved is I found out that my mercury fillings, of which I had 13, were the cause of my chronic adult asthma. But I found that out much after the fact of me getting these fillings. And what had happened was in my early 20s, I had dental insurance for the first time. I had one filling, and then I wound up with another 12 for a total of 13. And within 6 months, I developed asthma. So I went to many doctors, and they said, well, we don't know what's causing your asthma, but that's what you have. And mind you, I was a dance major in college, so I had no breathing problems at all. I was, very, very active. And this took a huge chunk of my life due to me not being able to breathe. And then I fast forward, and through bioenergetic medicine in the late 90s, I was tested at biofeedback. And the woman who was the practitioner said, you are mercury toxic. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I said, I can't imagine how. And she said, well, do you have those silver fillings, which we now know are deceptively called silver, but they're actually 48 to 54% mercury. So the whole thing about mercury in dentistry has been a cover up. So what wound up happening, I said, well, if it's me, it's everybody. And then I proceeded to stop my career. I was in real estate in California, had a great job, but I was sick. And after thinking, okay, it's me and everybody, now we can prove it's me and everybody, because the work by Mark and David Geyer, they were able to determine using the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey database, which is the gold standard of population studies. They were able to determine that, in fact, mercury dental amalgams can be a cause of not only asthma, but arthritis and other diseases. And that's using our gold standard database.
Thank you. And I think a lot of people would say then, well, okay, gosh, I've got mercury fillings in my mouth. People also think that they're no longer used in the United States, and that simply is not true. So we can talk about the populations who are still exposed to mercury in dentistry, but also I think people mistakenly believe that, well, okay, I've got a mercury amalgam in my mouth, if you have any. I can just get those popped out and replaced by composite and everything will be fine. Can you talk about why that is not the case?
Well, studies, here's the difference. And this is what our wonderful Health and Human Services, Bobby Kennedy, is now talking about: ethical science and using real peer-reviewed science in order to determine whether something is a good thing or not. And I need to go back because people need to know that mercury dental amalgam fillings have never been tested for safety and efficacy. This is a big deal because they were grandfathered in 1976 under GRAS, generally recognized as safe, due to long-term usage. So when the FDA comes out and says, oh, they're safe, based on what? And it's just an outrage to me, because when you meet people, especially now in our age group and older, I mean, you're younger than me, but the baby boomers, the amount of Alzheimer's disease and neurological problems that people are developing now, it's catastrophic. And there is a direct link between Alzheimer's disease and mercury amalgam fillings. And this research is well documented around the world. It's not just here, it's everywhere. When you have a dentist who actually knows how to remove mercury safely, you're literally going to be in a spacesuit, and so is the dentist and their staff. That is how serious this is, which is why the FDA doesn't recommend taking them out. They say good fillings. How on earth is it good to have a known neurotoxin implanted in your teeth? And normally it's not one filling, it's several fillings. I have many stories. One that comes to mind is back in the day when I was in California doing all of this, groundwork. and activism, we started lobbying the state of California because it had more leniency towards these types of problems. I met a guy who was a former basketball player for the Phoenix Sun, and his sister had her mercury taken out, and she actually had MS, and she recovered very, very quickly from her MS diagnosis. So he said, oh, I'm going to go do the same thing. I have 5 fillings, and they're small. I'm just going to take them out, and maybe my performance as an athlete will improve, and so on. He took them out improperly, and he got really, really sick. He wound up in the hospital. He lost a ton of weight, and it almost killed him because it's the vapor that is so toxic. So you have this low dose exposure for X amount of years, and all of a sudden it's a bolus dose when they're drilling it out of your head. People have died in the chair for heart attacks, and this is all documented. So this particular fellow that I met, he's like, I found out they started doing all of these tests, and they said it was heavy metals, mercury specifically, which is why I was sick. He recovered, but it almost killed him. And it certainly did incapacitate him so that he was no longer able to play professional basketball. So this is not a little thing. And safe removal, once you have them in, you absolutely need to have somebody who really knows how to remove them safely, because you're putting yourself at risk again. Now, you tell me, why on earth would something be implanted in my body already without informed consent? Because here is what I discovered as I was writing my citizens petition. And I'm going to read this because it is that important for people to understand. And this is from the FDA. This was written in 2022. And it says, based on the reasons described above, FDA has concluded that it is not necessary to require the dentist provide this information to patients in order to provide reasonable assurance of the safety and effectiveness of this device. After consideration, and based on all available scientific evidence, including evidence submitted in these petitions, FDA does not believe it is necessary or appropriate to require the dental health care providers provide this information to patients. This, to me, with this regulatory body, who I've been working with or trying to for all these years, I mean, this is contemptible. This is an outrage to me, and everybody in the world should be madder than ever, simply because more than 50% of the US population has this in their heads today. And that's not counting little kids under the age of 15, because when the NHANES did their studies and their calculations, they did not include anybody under the age of 15. And we know that they're putting mercury in babies. So what do you think about that? I mean, it's
right, so it's still being used on Americans today. Primarily, it's my understanding that it's lower income Americans, and it's our military service members who are receiving amalgam fillings as part of their treatment. Now, you mentioned your FDA petition. Can you tell us, and we'll provide information in the show notes to viewers about this petition, but tell us a little bit about this petition and how people can view it and participate in signing it.
Well, I was, with Bobby Kennedy leading the ship in healthcare, this is the last usage in the human body. He just made the announcement, as you mentioned earlier, that there is going to be no more mercury in vaccines. And I want to comment on that as well, because I have been a participant in what is now called the Minamata Convention on Mercury Treaty. And I went to my first UN meeting in 2002. And I'm thinking, oh, everybody's going to ban mercury. It's a mercury-containing product and so on. And the pushback that I got from that first experience was unbelievable. I'm thinking, why are these other non-governmental organizations look like they want to kill me? Because everybody has a special interest in continuing to allow the problem to exist in order to continue to fight the problem. And it was very apparent when I went to several different NGOs to say, hey, we could partner up and we can get this done. Well, when it came to vaccines containing thimerosal, which is another, I have a problem with that because they don't say mercury containing vaccines. They call it thimerosal and everybody's just like, oh, thimerosal. But they don't relate it to it being mercury. It's like silver fillings. They don't think it's mercury fillings. They think it's silver. So
Right.
all this deceptive languaging that they're using to hide mercury, it's an outrage. So back to the UN, we had brilliant people, including Mark and David Geyer and Dr. Boyd Haley, all present at the UN in the plenary saying we do not think that mercury in vaccines should continue. And mercury in vaccines did not even get into the treaty. And the reason being, and this was from the World Health Organization, and now mind you, I had a front row seat, so I was there. And they said, well, we can't have single dose vials because developing countries don't have the storage facilities. So we have to have it as a preservative. And so we can, continue to use it. So vaccines containing mercury did not get into the treaty. Now, mind you, blood pressure cuffs, thermometers, makeup, all of these other products and processes that use mercury were either phased down with a band-aid certain or completely banned immediately. And dental mercury amalgam is the only thing in the treaty that is on a phased down approach, which means we could all be long gone and they could still be phasing it down. And that, in my mind, I say I'm outraged a lot, but the more I look at this, the more outraged I get because people are being poisoned for profit. And you can't sugarcoat this any other way. If a dentist is using mercury today, in my mind, it's a crime against humanity. How can it not be? How can they claim ignorance? I mean, I found out about this. I'm not a doctor or an attorney or anything. I just simply have done an extensive amount of research on the topic. And my colleague and I, we published a book, Dr. Blanche Gruby, and there's almost 1,000 references in this that you can't make this stuff up. So when RFK Jr. is talking about science, he's talking about legitimate science. He knows. He knew about vaccines. You could take these two topics, vaccines and mercury in dentistry, and they're parallel because the results are the same. The amount of disease in relationship to the contamination from mercury in the human body, it's all similar. So I'm praying that my petition will help launch this so that finally, after all these years, that it will be banned. Now, mind you, earlier this year in January, the European Union with 27 countries banned the use of mercury. Now, they're all socioeconomic backgrounds. Some countries have more money than others, but they were able to do it. Many developing countries have already banned it. So all of this is just a lie. Thank you. I see our paper's up. We just published this paper, Dr. Blanche Gruby and myself, and we're begging the FDA to take action. And something that happened about a month or so ago when RFK Jr. was talking about grandfathered in. And mercury in dentistry was grandfathered in. And that also propelled me to write this petition because, you can't grandfather in something as toxic as mercury and just say it's safe and then tell the consumers and the professionals don't say it's mercury because you've never tested it. So the FDA, it needs a gut job, in my opinion. And after getting some communication back from the dental device department, which is what this follows under, I'm just appalled by the whole thing. Because if they would try to make dental mercury safe, it would be impossible. You cannot take a known neurotoxin and make it safe, especially because we know that it off-gases. At first, they said for many, many years, the American Dental Association, it's safe and effective restorative treatment. Well, they still say that. And the FDA, they parrot the ADA, but they add in a little bit, well, it's not safe for this group. Well, according to the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, they just recalculated and analyzed all of the existing data, and they found out that 85% of the U.S. population should not have this in their head. That's almost the whole country, for God's sake. And here we are still fighting for a ban. I mean, it's nuts.
Well, and, I recall, you talked about sort of the parallels between thimerosal-containing vaccines and mercury-containing amalgam fillings. And I think there are a lot of parallels there. And many of sort of longtime autism parents like myself remember 15, 20 years ago when we first heard about Dr. Boyd Haley and his work. And his very important work, which I think affects both people who are injured by mercury amalgams and who are injured by thimerosal in vaccines, and seeing his video of mercury off-gassing. His work has been very powerful, and he's also faced incredible challenges from FDA in his work. And I personally am very grateful for his work and for your work. And I hope that our viewers will go and take a look at your petition. It's very detailed, has a lot of important citations in it, and also take a look at the publications that you and Dr. Grube and others have done in this field. Your fight has been ongoing for a very, very long time, and I think
I'm tired.
and I think people, again, don't realize the parallel that's going on here between vaccines and mercury-containing dentistry and the damage that it can do. And it's, harm to the individual. It's also, you talked about improper removal. You're putting, your dentist who's removing it improperly is inadvertently putting their staff and themselves at risk as well. So there's a lot at stake here for people. And your discussion of the woman who had resolved her MS with the proper removal of her mercury fillings is very powerful, because we see a lot more people now diagnosed with neurological illnesses or autoimmune and neurological illnesses. We see more MS. I feel like we're seeing more ALS now in people, and oftentimes in much younger people. And I think this is one of the areas that needs to be explored in trying to determine why, again, going back to what the Secretary has said many times and what CHD has said many times, why Americans are sick and getting sicker.
Well, if I may, with this parallel, many, many years ago, I met an attorney from Waters and Krause, and we had this debate. Well, you mentioned about your child being autistic. And when I first met her, we were debating what's worse, mercury in vaccines, which she defended. She said it's worse, or mercury in dental fillings, and I defended, which I said, well, wait a minute. The mercury load from the parents is passed on to the fetus, and we have 1,000% proof of this. So we debated this, and she's like, well, but they're giving mercury to a little baby. And I'm like, well, I understand that, but these kids are already toxic before they're even born. They're already toxic. So we never really finished the debate, but I still stand by mercury in dentistry because it is a generational thing, and they know it. They know it. So even if you don't have mercury, but your grandparents did, that load is still continuing. And there is a genetic component to this. And boys are more sensitive to mercury and excreting mercury. So that's why the number of boys with autism is higher than girls. There's so much information on this topic that's legitimate science. And frankly, they've known since the beginning that it was toxic. It's just they chose the path of money and profit. And we're all paying for it. The horrors of being mercury toxic and not finding out, you just think that you have a disease, that you're being diagnosed by something that they say, but it's really most likely caused from your own dental work. And after all these years of researching and writing about it, it's provable now. This is nothing really new. It's been an ongoing fight. We call it the third amalgam war, that we're in it right now. And I really would like to see this resolved. And this is the first time in all my years doing this that RFK Jr. at the helm of this, we can get this done. If it's not done, And everything else, let's say we have all organic food and everybody's exercising and all of these other items changed, but this is still going on. There will never be an opportunity to make America healthy again. It just won't happen. Because frankly, whole body health really does start in the mouth. And we have to understand that this is all by design, that the dentist looks from here to here, the medical doctor looks everywhere else, and there's no correlation between medicine and dentistry to link the two together. And this eye-opening exposure that you're giving me this platform to talk about, I hope will open the eyes of people see that if their mouth isn't right, you can do all of this, because I did it. So I can talk about this firsthand experience. I'm like, why do I have asthma? I was a dancer. I was this, I was that. And all of a sudden I can't walk. I can't breathe. I can't do anything. And all these years later, I find it, oh my God, it's my teeth. And then I tell people I did everything wrong so I could tell you what not to do and to do it right, which is obviously safe removal once it's in. And people say, well, don't you want to just let it sit there? No, because burial, cremation, human waste, breathing is all more exposure to mercury. It doesn't go. It's an environmental catastrophic event. And, we've written about it. We've participated in the UN, me for 25 years now. We've submitted scientific papers as resource documents, and it's all provable. It really, really is. So the big takeaway is that this is a once in a lifetime, in my lifetime, and for the lifetime of those whose shoulders I stand on, Olympia Pinto, Hal Huggins, now Blanche Gruby, who frankly, they went after her like they did Hal. They took Hal's license. They took her license because she was taking out what they claimed to be safe mercury fillings with thousands of informed consents. And the patient would go to her as a biological dentist specifically to take it out. So, that whole thing, it's a mountain of corruption that is well documented, as I can show you with this 2022 document from the FDA saying, don't tell the patient.
So Anita, I think we could keep talking about this all day. We need to wind up, but thank you so much for coming on today, sharing your vast knowledge with our viewers. And I think you're going to open up a lot of eyes, and we'll have show notes directing people to the petition. And again, I'd encourage our viewers to go check that out. And thank you so much for being with us today.
And one last thing, don't be discouraged when you get to the petition to sign it. Just take your time and answer all the questions. You'll get through it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Dawn Richardson, and welcome to Advocacy Lifeline. You are here live on Children's Health Defense Television. Thank you so much for joining us today. The purpose of this show is to help empower you, our viewers, to be able to use your voice to affect change in law, policy, and public opinion through education and action for issues that are important to you and your family. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm just giving you my opinion, and these opinions today are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense or the National Vaccine Information Center, where I work full-time as the Director of Advocacy. I am so glad you're with us today. I'm going to be sharing with you legislation proposed at the state level this year that can help protect you from mRNA contaminated blood should you be in a situation where your medical care and determines that you're in need of a blood transfusion. When I say mRNA contaminated blood, I mean that the person who donated the blood for your transfusion has received a COVID-19 biologic injection or another mRNA containing immune altering product. Legislators in some states are filing bills with some different strategies to empower you and give you choices and knowledge to keep yourself safe from mRNA contaminated blood when you are getting a blood transfusion. The goal of today's show is to ultimately make legislators aware of these bills so they can file and pass them in every state. You can help us accomplish this by sharing this information with your state legislators. While the Food and Drug Administration allows those who receive a COVID-19 shot to donate blood, unvaccinated blood for transfusions is increasing demand, especially from those who have strived to keep their bodies free of contamination with synthetic mRNA and other ingredients in the COVID shots and what's coming down the line in future shots. A joint statement from America's Blood Centers, the American Red Cross, and the Association for the Advancement of Blood and Biotherapies claims, quote, "There is no scientific evidence that demonstrates adverse outcomes from the transfusion of blood products collected from vaccinated donors, and therefore no medical reason to distinguish or separate blood donations from individuals who have received a COVID-19 vaccine." This does little to reassure those in need of a transfusion, especially considering the documents released by the CDC that reveal an evidence of collusion between the CDC and other major social media corporations. They have this backwards because the burden is on the CDC and other organizations to make sure using vaccinated blood is safe, since there's insufficient evidence to support the safety of mRNA biological products. Informed consent is vital. Individuals receiving blood products deserve to know if they are receiving blood that contains synthetic mRNA containing lipid nanoparticles capable of inducing spike protein expression in susceptible cells and tissues. Research suggests new mRNA technology has the potential to cause significant harm. One such study by German researchers found that children who had received a COVID-19 mRNA vaccine by Pfizer had heightened levels of IgG4 antibodies 1 year after vaccination. IgG4 related disease associated with elevated levels of immunoglobulin G4 IgG4 antibodies in the blood and tissues is a rare systemic condition characterized by chronic inflammation and the formation of fibrous tissue in various organs. Other reports confirm a causal link between mRNA COVID-19 vaccines and myocarditis. Moderna trials for an HIV mRNA vaccine were halted during phase 1 of their trial due to puzzling skin side effects, suggesting harmful immune responses to the vaccine. Notably, a July 27, 2024 preprint study found that components of the Moderna COVID-19 mRNA vaccine were present in the vaccinated study participants' blood for up to 21 days after injection. And that was the total duration of the study's observation period. So the length of time it takes for the vaccine components, including spike proteins and lipid nanoparticles, to leave the blood and body, and the effect of these components on other organs remains unknown. As this new technology rapidly expands and vaccine developers are rushing to replace all vaccines with mRNA versions, bills that give transfusion recipients options to avoid blood donated from someone who received an mRNA vaccine are crucial to protect individuals from the known and unknown harm that mRNA technology can cause. The bottom line is there are insufficient studies to show the safety of injecting blood from an individual who has received a COVID-19 vaccine or any other mRNA vaccine into anyone. There is an increased demand for unvaccinated blood as a result of the many side effects and deaths experienced by individuals who receive the COVID-19 gene-altering injections. As of July 25th, 2025, there have been 38,742 deaths and 1,665,735 adverse events reported to the National Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, known as VAERS, following COVID-19 vaccine administration, of which most were mRNA products. Obviously, there are risks associated with COVID-19 vaccines that should not be ignored. These facts have generated legitimate concern regarding whether a blood transfusion from vaccinated donors could have any implications for recipients. Individuals deserve the right to know if they are consenting to the receipt of COVID-19 or mRNA vaccinated blood. For many, taking the risk isn't worth it if there's another option. In the 2025 legislative session, there are 8 states that have had bills filed to give people options if they want to avoid mRNA contaminated blood. And these states are Idaho, Kentucky, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. These bills are utilizing 2 basic types of strategies. The first of these strategies is allowing for and protecting autologous and directed blood donations, and the second is requiring blood labeling. Autologous blood donations are where you yourself are authorized to use your own blood, where you bank it ahead of time for medical procedures if it ends up being needed. This promotes autonomy and personal health management. This is the safest type of blood transfusion in terms of reactivity since it's your own blood. There's no risk of a new viral infection or the formation of new red cell antibodies. If you haven't been vaccinated with any mRNA products, then you can count on non-mRNA vaccinated blood. Directed blood donations, on the other hand, permit patients to choose a specific donor to donate blood for them. This can ensure compatibility of blood types and align with your preference of non-mRNA vaccinated blood. This allows family and friends to create their own networks of non-mRNA vaccinated compatible donors. You know, I encourage everyone to think about this and network within your family and friends so that when the time comes, if you're needing blood or someone you care about needs blood, you'll have your network set up. And this way you can trust it's not mRNA contaminated. Directed blood donations from trusted families and friends is definitely a great way to go. Now, some critics say that having directed blood donors results in a decrease to the overall blood supply, but an individual patient arranging for a direct blood donation from someone they choose is not taking a potential donor out of the blood donation pool. When a patient knows they may need a blood transfusion, a directed or an autologous blood collection allows them to operate completely outside of the normal blood supply. Therefore, blood that would have gone to the patient from the usual supply remains, negating any loss from a potential donor. And then who knows, maybe when somebody goes through the process of giving a directed donation, they hadn't donated before, they'll see how easy it is, and then they'll take on doing it on a regular basis. So I don't buy that complaint at all from the other side on this. Now, directed donations are still subjected to the same type of testing for diseases as regularly donated blood. Directed blood donation is already an established medical practice, complete with government regulations and standard industry practices. And any risk present in a transfusion of this sort is not considered so high that the practice is prohibited. Plus, the patient in question is likely already experiencing informed consent to a degree beyond what they would have from an anonymous donor. Because there are challenges with labeling, which I'll talk about here shortly, I am a fan of having a bill that uses both strategies together. Let's face it, even the best laid plans don't cover every scenario. Say you get into a bad car accident and need blood quickly, where there isn't time for a directed blood donation, your only option may be to, through blood labeling, choose to receive non-vaccinated blood if it's available. So let's talk about some of the challenges with labeling. Some states receive their blood from out of state. Bills would have to have provisions to deal with this because this supply of blood won't have the information to go with it when there is no reciprocal law in place in the other state that is supplying the blood. Therefore, the blood would have to be presumed to be mRNA vaccinated because you just don't know and you can't take a chance of labeling it incorrectly. If the donor is uncertain about their vaccination status, the label would also have to designate that it's presumed mRNA vaccinated or status unknown or something like that, again, so that people aren't taking a chance. So even with donors having the best of intentions and sharing their vaccination status at the time of donation to the best of their memory, they still may get it wrong. There are also privacy concerns. Here's yet another set of databases that records vaccination status for donors. There needs to be privacy and confidentiality protections for vaccinated status for the people who are donating blood. During COVID, there were 2 mRNA injections available, Pfizer and Moderna, and then the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was not mRNA. So people might not even correctly remember which vaccine they had. So the label may not be valid. So you just have to keep that in mind with labeling. This will absolutely get better once tests are developed and cost effective for screening blood. So we don't currently have that. And until then, if avoiding mRNA contaminated blood is important to you, autologous and directed donations are going to be your best bet. So let's take a look at what each of these bills filed this session does more specifically. I'd like to start with an Idaho bill, Idaho House Bill 131, and this requires the disclosure of whether a blood donor has received a COVID-19 or any mRNA vaccine for all human blood donations intended for human infusion, and it requires the labeling of the blood donation based on whether or not the donor received a COVID-19 vaccine or any other mRNA vaccine in their lifetime. This bill also establishes the individual's right to request blood based on whether or not the blood originated from a vaccinated individual during a non-emergency situation as determined by the person who is actually providing the medical services. So unfortunately, this bill died. It didn't get movement before the end of session. But again, I just want to point out, this is a pretty new topic. Now we had more than a handful of states last session that had labeling bills, but now, keying in on autologous and directed donations and adding that, this is the first session where we've really seen a pickup on and an interest in this. And so hopefully a lot of these bills that, did not pass will be able to get filed next session. And I would love to see a groundswell of legislators around the country filing these bills, because this is really going to be your only protection. We can't wait for the government to do it for us. We have to be able to work within our networks and help our family and friends when they need blood to make sure that they are not getting vaccinated blood. And this is even true for people who have had a COVID vaccine or in the future have an mRNA vaccine and they have suffering damage from it. I would think it would be even more important for them to avoid further instigation with more mRNA contaminated blood. So, okay, I'd like to move on to Kentucky. Man, this House Bill 140 is one of my favorites because it is so comprehensive. It was hard to move, but it has thought about many situations and tried to tackle it head on. It does a number of things. First of all, it requires that all blood establishments test donated blood for spike proteins and antibodies to the SARS-CoV-2 virus and synthetic mRNA once there's been FDA approval of a test to detect the presence of such mRNA products. So this bill is very forward-thinking. It's just waiting for a test to become available so that that testing can be required. It also requires the donor to consent to receive genetically altered blood. This is really taking informed consent to the next level. And it also requires donor mRNA vaccine or antibody treatment disclosure. So it's covering beyond COVID. It prohibits the sale or donation of any blood by a person who has received experimental gene therapies or medications of any kind, including those containing gene-altering drugs. This prohibits a person from being compelled to donate blood or tissue of any kind. Gosh, that is just so important, especially what we've seen in China with these people with having their organs harvested against their consent. I mean, we want to make sure that nobody is forced to do this. It also prohibits a person from donating blood if they've received a genetically engineered blood or blood products or have received experimental therapies or medications of any kind. You know, when people go in and they're looking to they need a blood transfusion, you know, it's usually in a situation where they necessarily didn't plan, and people need to be assured that the blood supply is safe. And these are new things that are being done that really they're not screening for. And this is also forward thinking. Also, the bill authorizes a person to make an autologous donation, which is a donation for themselves, which we said before, or a directed donation, which is a donation from a specific person of blood, and to prohibit establishments from preventing or prohibiting such donations or from imposing fees above 20% of the charge for a regular unit of blood. Now, there have been those who have gone against bills that would allow for this, complaining that it was going to cost too much. Well, a lot of the bills have handled this by adding a small fee, a reasonable fee to cover this, and people really aren't objectionable to that as long as it is fair and it doesn't become cost prohibitive for people. Now, bill also requires the labeling of blood donations that include the mRNA vaccine status of the donor, and it prohibits blood from being transferred into a patient unless the blood is labeled and tested negative for spike protein, SARS-CoV-2 antibodies, and synthetic mRNA. And it requires a facility or a provider to inform the patient, obtain written consent prior to administering blood that contains the presence of mRNA, including required counseling on risks and benefits. This just keeps going. And that's why I love this bill, that it's thought of this to get these conversations going. It prohibits a patient from being discriminated against based on their consent or refusal to receive blood with mRNA present. That's important too. And it authorizes blood establishments to release untested blood for transfusion during an emergency, but upon testing, if the blood tests positive for spike protein, SARS-CoV-2 antibodies, and synthetic mRNA, the patient's intending physician is required to be notified, and in turn is required to notify the patient of the test results. And this also prohibits a state agency from acquiring or maintaining a list containing the vaccination status of the citizens of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I love this. I have talked in length before about the dangers with vaccine tracking because it can lead to vaccine status discrimination. And it's really none of the government's business to maintain this data on a person because it can be used. It has been used. We saw it during COVID. So I love that this bill will prohibit the state agency from maintaining any kind of list here. The bill also requires all health benefit plans to provide coverage for any directed or autologous blood transfusions. And finally, it requires that health facilities, health services, and healthcare providers to have appropriate infrastructure in place to store and label the blood. And they're supposed to have that done within 90 days of the effective date of the act. Now, unfortunately, this bill died, and it was a pie in the sky. It was a heavy lift, but I love that this is the only bill that thought about all of these conditions, to be forward thinking, talking about some of this stuff. And it's a great example to look at, to consult with when you're planning a bill to be filed in your state, just to see what you might want to maybe include in some of the legislative findings at the top, or maybe look for an amendment should the bill get some momentum and be moving. But this bill did not even get a hearing in the Health Services Committee. But I know the people in Kentucky are going to keep working and pushing this. So hopefully next session we can get something passed there. All right, the next state, Maryland. Now, a lot of people, this is House Bill 1456. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of states have some form of autologous or directed blood donations already available, but they're not firmly planted as your absolute right, and there needs to be some upgrades to the laws. And this bill, House Bill 1456, requires tissue banks that facilitate autologous or directed blood donations to comply with an actual physician's order, and for hospitals to allow autologous or directed blood donations. It does authorize fees so that in case, there's some extra costs involved with allowing for this to happen, the hospital hospital doesn't lose money. So this was a good bill to shore up an existing system. But unfortunately, this one died when the session ended. It didn't get a chance to go through the session and pass. Now, the next state, Pennsylvania, Senate Bill 957. There's a lot of good in this bill. And what's so exciting about this bill is it was just filed and Pennsylvania is still in session. So there's hope for this bill to pass. This bill allows patients to receive autologous and directed blood donations, and it requires both medical facilities and blood providers to disclose the vaccination status of the blood to patients upon their request. The bill also stipulates that disclosure of the blood's vaccination status must be part of the required informed consent process for transfusions. This bill is currently sitting in the Pennsylvania Senate Health and Human Services Committee. It was just referred there at the end of July. So if you're in Pennsylvania, you're going to want to contact the Senate Health and Human Service Committee members, your own senator, and your representative, and ask them to support Pennsylvania Senate Bill 957. The next state, Rhode Island, House Bill 5864. This requires hospitals and healthcare facilities to permit autologous and directed blood donations and for blood banks to comply with the healthcare provider's orders. It also permits fees. And this is a problem. The doctors, people can find a doctor to write a order for a directed donation, but then the hospital won't comply. So this would have forced hospitals and healthcare facilities that do the donations already to actually comply with them. But unfortunately, this bill did not necessarily, wasn't killed by a vote, but it was actually held for further study. So hopefully people in Rhode Island, if you're seeing this, you can get some of these legislators that support this bill, this information, so that they can add it to the study materials and continue to push for this passage next session. All right, next state, Texas, my home state, Senate Bill 125. This requires very simple, and I love this bill because of the simplicity. It has nothing to do with vaccines. It doesn't have vaccine in it. It just simply requires a blood bank and a hospital that facilitates blood donations to allow individuals to receive autologous and directed blood donations, and it allows fees to cover the cost. This is simple. It just sets up the system so that, like I said before, y'all can create your own networks, talk to your family and friends. You can go on Amazon if you don't know your, or go to a pharmacy where you can get your blood type easily. Get blood types, find out who's compatible with who, get your own network together and be ready so that, and if you're going in the hospital for an elective procedure, what if something goes wrong? Just go ahead and donate, direct it to yourself, have it go to you in case it's needed. And guess what? If you don't need it, that blood ends up in the supply and it's unvaccinated. So it's better for the next person who gets it. So that's why I love this Texas bill. It was simple. This would be the bare minimum that every state should file and pass. Now, we're going to move on to Utah, House Bill 400. This prohibits a healthcare facility or a healthcare provider from preventing autologous or directed blood donations. It has some simple restrictions that are kind of common sense, like if the donation would have been detrimental to the donor or the patient, if there was an emergency, or there's not enough time to coordinate and arrange for a directed blood donation. So those are some of the restrictions. It also adds provider liability protection. This is important. So if a provider in the hospital is allowing you to get, if you need blood, you're getting your directed blood donation, and then something happens because that blood, this protects the provider from any kind of liability. Because I mean, that was a chance that you took, a risk that you took, and it's not fair to expose the provider. You know, whether or not that's a real concern or not, I'm not sure. There's a lot of evidence there. However, what it does do is it adds to the confidence of a provider to support you in your request for an autologous or directed blood donation, knowing that they're not going to be on the hook for something that goes wrong based on that donation. Okay, and finally, we have Wyoming, House Bill 152. This required blood donors to disclose their COVID or mRNA vaccination status. It also requires labeling and allows the request for unvaccinated blood in a non-emergency if that blood supply is available. So this bill also died. This one didn't get introduced before the deadline in the House where it had to be introduced. But I love that it was filed again, first session on these some of these labeling bills in some states it's their second session. So we're moving forward. But just kind of summarizing all of this together, I do think a more successful strategy is combining some labeling with a directed autologous blood donation protocol that's in law, it's your right to do. And that's only because there are going to be times where you can't know ahead of time if there's an emergency. You're not going to know if there's if you need to get blood or not, like especially in a situation with a car accident or some kind of other accident. Now, if you're going in for a surgery and you have a little time, maybe you yourself can't donate, but you have family members you can call and say, hey, get to the hospital. They do take blood donations here. Earmark one for me. So when I'm in my procedure, if I need help, the blood is there for me and I know it won't be mRNA contaminated. And also, you have a better shot at, not getting something else that's not yet screened for when, it's all good. This is all about empowerment. It's about not relying on the government, but you do want to have those labels there in case that none of these are options. And then at least you're hedging your bets. There's no guarantee with the labels because it's self-reporting, but it's better than nothing. So I would love to encourage you all to please share this show with others. You go to the CHD TV website and under shows, pick Advocacy Lifeline. You can copy the link to the show. You can send it through text, email. You can post it on social media. Send it to your legislators. If you want these options in your state, they're going to have to file bills and pass them. Let them know about these options. And I think a lot of your freedom-loving legislators would love to help out on this. Please consider a donation to Children's Health Defense and the National Vaccine Information Center so that we can all continue this work. A lot of the work that I do in my job at NVIC allows me to have this knowledge and access to information so I can bring it to you in the show, even though this is my own show and with my own opinions hosted by wonderful CHD TV. So please donate. I want to encourage you to come back in 2 weeks on Wednesday. We are showing at 10:30 Eastern Time, 7:30 Pacific Time. I'm thankful to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And God bless you. God bless America. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And please stay tuned for the medical professional story of the day from the People's Study.
Right, tell everyone your name.
My name is Marquita Marie Emmanuel-Williams. I'm here today to tell a story.
Well, you chose the title of this. You called it the Minority Report.
I did.
Why?
Because CHD, Del Bigtree, any number of other people, organizations that are associated with you guys do a fantastic job of representing everyone that's injured. But for every 20 faces, every 20 stories I hear, there's only one minority face. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that there's way more injury and hurt out there. So I made it a point to come here and tell you at least about Jonathan's story and maybe a few other stories mixed in.
Okay, let's go.
Jonathan was my cousin, Jonathan Michael Emanuel. Jonathan made it to the age of 22 before he suffered from complications of the MMR shot and autism. He made it as long as he did because my uncle is a Boeing engineer and his mom graduated with a math degree and she's an incredible resource. it's something else when you have the resources and the knowledge of how to utilize those resources. He was given every opportunity to be the best version of himself, and that's why he made it as long as he did. The very first time I heard a whisper, and that's all it was a whisper of MMR vaccine injury, was at my grandmother's house. And she said at about that 15-month-old stage, hey, Jonathan had a shot and there's something wrong with him and they're taking him to the doctors. Again, this represents excellence, opportunity, education, and their child was injured. I couldn't believe it. I would have expected it of people who weren't nearly as well resourced, lived in a poverty-stricken area. But that wasn't the case at all. My grandmother wouldn't talk about whatever was going on with Jonathan after that. When I would see Jonathan at my daughter's birthday parties, which were 2 years, there was 2 years between her and Jonathan. It was always remarkable for what he could do. He had some repetitive behaviors where you knew there was something somewhere that was wrong. He had some behavioral issues. But what I've come to realize, mostly because I have a niece now that I'm convinced has had vaccine injury, is that they're super frustrated that they cannot express those things that are in their head. I do a great job with my niece. She'll go get my sister and she'll say, say this, and it'll sound like gobbledygook. I understand 90% of what she says, but that other 10%, it is just gobbledygook. And 99% of the time, my sister will get on the phone and say, oh, well, it's XYZ, My niece could do anything. I feel like if there was a way for me to unlock whatever little gate is preventing her, she's amazing. Just absolutely amazing.
But she got injured by shots as well.
It's my belief. All they've ever said was she just has a developmental delay. She's received every single shot. I've talked to my sister. My sister continues to vaccinate. I love her dearly. Everyone has to make up their own minds. My daughter, Kayami, she has an older son. He's 15. There was another baby before the latest baby that was born. Well, I should say that there was a pregnancy. And she was in that early trove of COVID vaccine. Let's run out and get it. She's a school teacher. The pregnancy terminated itself.
Wait, so she went and got a COVID shot in the first trimester, you think?
Yep.
And that was it. Sorry
and
to hear
then, but the new baby's gorgeous. We love him. Cruz.
that. And has she stopped having COVID shots?
No.
Oh, gosh.
But fingers crossed. He's 3 months, or will be 3 months here shortly. And then a friend of mine, and that's my last story, is Charles Whitaker. He had a son, and we all went on a little play date. We were at some place, we were playing student pool, and this kid had a lot of repetitive behaviors. Again, incredibly smart. Like, you could talk to this kid and you knew he understood everything, but it was all very behavioral, and he only really bonded with his dad. So his dad needed to be there, more than anything else. His dad was an electrician. He had to go to work, but at his worst moments, they would have to call him. He would have to come get him, so there's a lot of injury out there. They're just not here. They don't know what's happening to their families. So hopefully one more face and we can get the word out.
Well, thank you for that. But I haven't finished with you yet.
Okay.
Because what do you do for a living?
I am a registered respiratory therapist at my baseline. I have an undergrad degree in respiratory therapy, an undergrad degree in psychology, and I have an MBA with an emphasis in healthcare administration.
Okay, so that's why I
It's a
haven't
lot.
finished with you yet. I need to know what happened during COVID. You're a
So-
respiratory nurse. You're kidding me. Please tell us the truth about it.
So, I had not done emergency care, so called, because that's another story, but emergency care in the hospital for years. It's my first preference to educate the community and work in home care. That's where I excel, skilled nursing, teach the nurses, But they put a call out for respiratory therapists to come there to New York City. Great, fine. Sign me up. You don't even have to pay me. Just put me in the most damaged areas, Harlem, wherever. I want to be there so I can help us. They took the dentist before they would take the respiratory therapist because they told us we didn't have recent, i.e. within the last 2 years, ICU experience. You tell me what the dentist knows about running the vent. Any day.
What the dentist knows about running a vent?
A ventilator.
Okay. So did you get to do anything?
No.
They didn't want you.
They didn't want us. And it was at that point, I mean, the day that they announced they were going to close the country down, I said, this is crazy. We don't do this. But there was still something in the back of my head. Maybe, Keita, maybe you're just being too critical. But after they told us the dentist could come, they welcomed the dentist, but not the respiratory therapist. I was like, this is a joke. And it's always been a joke. Everything about it's been a joke. Everything from those masks and everything else. It was a joke. There are people who have medical degrees that are stacked upon medical degrees, and I know they know what I knew about a real mask, about the rooms where it's closed and there's negative pressure, and I mean, so it was a joke. All of it was a joke.
I have a question for you. I wonder if you could clear this up. So we were having numerous reports coming and sitting on the bus of people who went in with potential, pneumonia or something, or maybe just struggling breathing. Anyway, remdesivir, and they end up being put on a vent and they're given fentanyl and they die. Is that how you treat potential pneumonia?
No, so that was a whole other thing.
Thank you.
They dropped all the protocols, right? All of them. There's nothing anywhere ever where we decided, oh, okay, well, yeah, we'll just wait until they're circling the drain to treat them. Where we sent them home, where they preemptively said, you know what? I think I'm circling the drain. Let me go to the ER. They get to the ER, and the ER goes, do worse, then come back. It was ridiculous. It was just absolutely ridiculous. But if you followed the money, you understood it. I had a friend who had a father that was in assisted living, nursing homes, the whole 9 yards. The rashes, the ulcers, the to the bone ulcers that this guy had by the end of it, because there wasn't enough staff, because they dropped protocols, and all of it's just being whitewashed because it was COVID. And we couldn't help ourselves. We were doing the best we could. They weren't doing the best they could. They knew what they were doing. This was about money. It was always about money.
So as a respiratory therapist, a lot of these people are claiming they didn't want to be ventilated. They didn't want to be put on the vent.
For whatever it's worth, never got the shot. That was another problem.
Okay.
That's another reason why I don't work at the hospitals, because I refuse to get the shot.
Okay.
Period.
Well, look, thank you for talking to us. Sorry about all your losses and stuff. And thank you for coming and speaking to us.
Absolutely. Thanks for letting me see the bus, sign the bus, and tell my story.
The truth is, vaccine injuries are real and they've been ignored.
These childhood vaccinations The people of America are telling us they are not safe and effective. We are seriously concerned at Children's Health Defense about the disinformation and misinformation out there.
Society does not want to acknowledge vaccine injury, period. My son's life has been ruined physically and emotionally, and he is persecuted for the mere fact that he exists.
After 8 years of litigation, HHS conceded by preponderance of the evidence that Chris died from her HPV vaccinations.
Parents deserve the truth. We deserve real informed consent because no parent should have to live the nightmare I do.
I am heartbroken to hear these stories, and it makes me want to do something.
How about we ban pharmaceutical ads on TV?
I've advocated it, and you have a co-sponsor.
The government has decided that this particular industry doesn't have to be liable to anybody.
I am extremely suspicious, as a lawyer, of immunity that is granted in any blanket way across the board to any manufacturer or to anyone.
So if we're gonna do something, the North Star has gotta be medical freedom. I get to decide what's good for me and my family with proper information. And if I'm given improper information, just like in any other industry, there's gotta be accountability.
No more Pfizer-sponsored science. We need independent science.
I am competing against a pharmaceutical lobby of 1,600 lobbyists. That's 3 lobbyists for each member of Congress. This is insane.
Everybody sitting here, bar 2, vaccinated their families with catastrophic results. Over 12,000 signatures on those 2 buses of death, death, death. When will enough be enough? How many more buses? So this has to stop. And we implore you, please, to follow us at Children's Health Defense, at least break down the truth and get to the truth behind the science of what is really happening.